Okay, so we're going to get started with the disclaimer of this is open to everyone in the community. It's therapeutic advice, not direct therapy. So a lot of general things. There's so much we can dive into with self-care. So I'll just be touching on some main topics, some things that I've worked on with clients that have really helped them to reformat their life, take a lot of the anxiety away, add some more control into their life, embrace some of that ambiguity. So if you find that some of it applies to you, fantastic. I hope that you are able to use it in your life. Other things may not apply, and that's okay too. Also, keeping in mind that any examples I use might be real, but details will be changed. I have permission to use examples from different cases, things like that. Details will be changed. Some things are also made up. And please continue to be interactive. So if you have questions throughout the seminar, just throw them in the chat. If you want them to be private, you can send them directly to the host. If you're okay with everybody seeing them, send them to everybody in the chat, and I'll be responding to them at different parts throughout the seminar. All right, well, let's get started for our final seminar. All right, let's see here. And let's hope I am doing it correctly this time. Okay, perfect. All right, so I'm really excited to share self-care with you guys. This has been something that's been on my mind for the longest time. It's one of the major topics that I work with clients on the regular. Anxiety, depression, life transitions, all the different topics that we've covered. Self-care is one of those foundational building blocks that are vital for us to focus on. So my question to you is, how do you best practice self-care? It's vital that you remember self-care is a requirement for our mental, physical, and emotional health. We often treat it as a reward once we've finished work for the day or the evening. Yet as we get older, our tasks are more often ongoing. Then there's always more that could be done. It's not so much like when we're younger and once we get our homework done or our chores done, we can relax for the rest of the day. When we're adults, there's always something more to do. So it's really hard to put that hard stop and learn how to relax. And remembering that life is a marathon, it's not a sprint. So if we want to be able to manage our energy, our resources, our mental acuity, we have to treat it like a marathon. If I said you only have one car for the rest of your life, you're going to take really, really great care of that car. Same with ourselves. We only get one body, one mind for the rest of our lives. We need to take care of that even while we're living our life, sometimes working too hard, taking care of others in need. And something to remember that self-care is best practiced as an integration within our lives. It's not just a one-week vacation once a year. That's not enough. It might even feel guilty or selfish to take time for you, but it's the most important thing that you can do. You can't operate fully, impact people, or care for others if you aren't properly caring for yourself first. Life is a marathon, not a sprint. Really, self-care is not about figuring out how to maintain me living in this torturous situation, but instead changing things so that I'm not living in torture anymore. Oftentimes we're just so exhausted, it's hard to get up in the morning. Well, let's change that so that we're excited, or at least not dreading it. So I want you to really think about this self-care as an integration model. I'm not trying to add a bunch of things on top of your to-do list. Oh, great, I have 1,000,010 things to do, and now you're asking me to add self-care on top of it. Where am I going to fit it in? Well, we're going to talk about how to integrate that within the list that you already have, and in fact, streamline these lists so that they don't feel as overwhelming or overbearing. So we're going to do some tips, some tricks, allowing life to be a little bit easier, working smarter, not harder in some ways. One really massive educational example I had in my life, a real learning lesson, and you may have even remembered some of this story, some of you from last week. I had a really, really dear friend through my counseling program, and we were, you can't really get through a master's in counseling program without somebody on your team, a really close friend, comrade to touch base with, to check in with, to help with projects, that kind of thing. We became best friends overnight. And he happened to be 62 and a pastor. Well, when he started out, he was 59, and it's a 3-year program. And he passed away about 2 weeks before we graduated. So he was the head pastor in school full time. He was doing a lot. And he had had 2 heart attacks by that point in his life. And he just continued to push harder and harder and harder. And so we had a couple arguments about it. I think his wife appreciated that I wouldn't let him overbook his schedule, and that there was a team of people surrounding him, his receptionist, his wife, myself, and a few other friends that would keep him in check from trying to do too much. He loved people. People were always on his heart. That was his mission, to help as many people as he possibly could. In fact, if anybody needed help, he had a difficult time turning them away, having appointments 9 o'clock at night. And the month of April, a few years back, he kept pushing harder and harder while preparing for Easter service, and his heart just couldn't take it. And he passed away. And that was one of the lessons that I would always take away from our friendship, was that how many more people could he have helped if he had just taken care of himself? How many more years would he have had to enjoy his life, enjoy his family, enjoy his friends, and impact the world if he had just stopped and taken care of himself? And he knew he wasn't. In fact, we got in an argument just even a few days prior to that Friday where he passed away. And I told him, your heart, your body is telling you to slow down. It doesn't listen to due dates. It doesn't listen to, I'll be fine until after Easter. It said, slow down now. And so we need to pay attention to our heart and our mind and our spirit when it's warning us, because we want to be in it for the long haul. We need to be long-sighted. And so this self-care talks about that, about taking some of that stress off of our hearts and off of our minds, so we can focus on what's most important in our lives, and then also do so for a very, very long time. So self-care. Busy does not equal effective. Keep that in mind. Just because I say I'm busy does not mean I'm being effective. In fact, they are often quite opposite. And if we're not taking time for self-care, we're missing out on the invitation to experience our life fully. Take some time. Print that out somewhere, because that's something vitally important. We are not designed to just wake up in the morning and go immediately to work, to come home, to do chores, to mindlessly watch Netflix for some sort of solace, and then go to sleep to repeat the process all over again. We need to invigorate our lives and integrate fun into our lives on a daily basis, whatever that might look like. So I ask you to think back to when you were a young kid. You ever remember waking up with energy and excitement for the day? I know for me, when I was really young, I would wake up at the crack of dawn. In fact, my parents had a rule that said I wasn't allowed to come into the room and wake them up until the sun had risen. That's how early I would wake up. In fact, I was an expert on every type of infomercial there was. OxyClean, back when that first came out, the Shark vacuum, because that's all that was on when I would wake up as early as I did. And then I would finally get to watch the Discovery Channel, because the news wasn't all that interesting and didn't have too many choices at 3 o'clock in the morning. But then do you remember just like one day it stopped? You stopped waking up refreshed. You stopped waking up with wonder in your heart, but instead started waking up with dread, almost dreading what is coming next, because it's going to be the same thing over and over again. I think typically this happens for us mostly in high school. We're getting up for the drudgery of the day. What test, what bully, what social thing we're going to have to deal with. It became rather monotonous than having fun. So how do we get that energy back? Even some people, like myself, experience something called night revenge. When I get home after work and I get things done around the house, I almost don't want to go to bed because I know that I'm going to have to do it all over again. And I love what I do. But if you're not properly doing your self-care, even the things that you love to do can start to become less fun, less enjoyable, and start to wear on us. So we need to reprioritize what's important for us. A schedule should be set up so that you get to make sure you have the time for the fun things, not just getting all of the burdens done, but so that we get to the things that give us life. How often do you schedule fun into your life rather than just scheduling your to-do list? Someone in the chat even mentioned how sad it is to think of replacing wonder with dread. So true. So let's start with what burnout is. Some of you may be experiencing it right now. Some of you may have been in it for quite some time. Some of you walk a tightrope of on the verge. I know myself, when I experienced some burnout after grad school, it had just been an overwhelming amount of work. My good friend, best friend, had just passed away, and I was doing a summit at his church that we had been working on together, volunteering for, it was something like 60 to 80 hours a week for several weeks in a row. It was a lot. It was so much. I started a new job, working at Newtown Therapy during that time, and had just finished working an insane amount of hours through internship. I was overwhelmed. In fact, it took me the whole summer to get out of the burnout. It was a great education experience in a way that said, this is what burnout's going to look like for you, and this is how you get out of it. And then I can understand what the warning signs are to prevent it from happening again. So if you're already burnt out, there are some ways to remedy that. But first, let's go through some of the symptoms themselves. This is a lot of symptoms. You may not be experiencing all of them, but some of these pick out, your grouping, and that's what your warning signs for burnout are saying you're already burnout is going to look like. For me, apathy sometimes, difficult to concentrate, easily distracted, feeling exhausted, a little overwhelmed, a lot of frustration that I'm not getting to things that I feel like are what I want to do. The image on the top right is kind of these moments where we're saying, well, send me a sign, and all there are signs that are telling us, stop, turn around, wrong way, that you're on the verge for burnout. And we're like, well, I'll just get to it, I'll get to it, until we really hardcore burn out. So when we find ourselves actually in burnout, well, how do we get out? Well, one is to do a hard stop, like a really solid vacation where we disconnect from everything, and then use part of that vacation time to reevaluate how I'm going to go back to my life and do it differently. And we're going to talk about some of those strategies coming up. We need to do differently. We can't just take a week or 2 weeks off and then expect everything to be fine when we go back into the thing that was burning us out in the first place. So hard stop can work really, really well. And then integrating self-care following that vacation time in order to kind of resubmerge us, or excuse me, to pull us back out of the water rather, give us a deep breath of air and then keep us swimming rather than just jumping right back in and being submerged. The second way, if that's not an option of a hard stop vacation, is to then just slowly integrate some of the strategies that we're going to talk about and then really focus on that. And over time, you'll start to pull out and rise above and get air once again. But it takes time. You have to think about how long have I been in burnout for? Give myself some time to come back. Something also to keep in mind is we need to implement hardcore boundaries with work or the things that are draining us deeply in order to come back to life after a burnout, especially with work, especially with virtual work, when so often we're working from home, that we have to do hard stops where I'm not working after I close my laptop. That's it. I can't continue on this path where I check my email at 8 o'clock at night and now my head's spinning with work stuff. And if your boss doesn't understand that, well, that's something you're going to have to figure out, because we're talking about your life here. That job would have an ad out for a new one of you in 20 minutes. You have to be with you for the rest of your life. So keep that in mind. A lot of times we're experiencing lack of enjoyment in things that typically do bring us joy. And so we want to still do those things and push through that feeling of discontentment, and slowly we'll start to feel better. We also have to tolerate the anxiety and the guilt and feelings of selfishness when we're doing the things that bring us care, self-care. Sometimes I'll be sitting there reading a book and I'll feel like, but I could be doing so many other things in this moment. I feel like I'm wasting time, but I'm not wasting time. I'm doing something that's healthy for me. I'm learning, and it's something important to revitalize me, recharge me. So we have to sometimes deny those feelings that are lying to us in order to really embrace what self-care is designed to do for us. So next we need to prioritize. So this might be a familiar sight. It's being on an airplane, and these are the oxygen masks that come down. Hopefully you've never had an emergency so bad on a plane where the oxygen mask had to come down, but I'm sure you've all at least heard the flight attendant talk about them. And what do they say? Always put your oxygen mask on first. And I think that it can be really hard for us, especially if we're there with our family. How do I put mine on first and not my child's mask? Well, it's just like self-care. If I'm not taking care of me first, I'm not going to be able to help anybody else. In fact, I had a mom come into my office and she refused to put herself first. And I said, fine. You feel like that's something that you can't do. I want you to, she had 3 children. And I said, okay, well, pick your favorite child and everyone else dies. And she went, wait, what? And I said, well, if you can't put your oxygen mask on first, you can only have enough time to put it on one of them. And it took her a second. She realized, whoa, that's not a choice I ever have to want to make. Because if we think about it, if we're on an airplane and we put the oxygen mask on the person next to us, well, then we're going to pass out and we're going to be useless. We're going to be in the way of people trying to get out. We're going to cause other people to try and want to help us. We become a stumbling block. We're useless if we're passed out. We're useless if we're burnt out to what we really want to be doing in our lives. And so I said to her, I said, if you put your oxygen mask on, you have then the time to help all of your children. And that was a moment for her to just completely reset and reprioritize the things that she was doing in her life. We'll have no energy or spirit or mental capacity to effectively love others, do for others, or even live our own life. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to be in a relationship with someone who's miserable and exhausted all the time. I don't know about you, but it sounds pretty awful to not have any energy to love somebody or do what's required in a relationship. That's why we really need to prioritize ourselves first and foremost. And it might be really counterintuitive. However, if I am on empty, I'm not giving to anybody. I have second on here in my relationship. The children, I'm raising them to be independent. In a few years, they're going to be off to college. Then I have just my partner next to me, and I don't want to turn to them and be like, who are you again? So if I'm not taking care of myself first, and then second, taking care of the relationship with my spouse, then everything else can fall into place after that. And people tend to have great arguments about, well, what about work? If I don't have money, then I can't do this, I can't do that. And I say, at the end of the day, chips down, who are you saving first? Are you saving your work before your family? No. Your family's going to be sticking by you no matter what we go through. Let's create that type of environment through example and demonstrate how to take care of oneself so that the kids know what that looks like. And it's okay, again, if it feels a little guilty or selfish at first. In fact, that might actually be a sign that you're working on your self-care correctly. You may just not be simply used to it yet. And it's ideal to keep pushing through, and eventually the feelings will follow. Some of that selfishness might steal some of the joy away of just having a bubble bath. Push through it. The more bubble baths you have, the more relaxing they'll feel. It's okay to lock the door. Also, people of faith often ask, well, shouldn't God be the first on my list? And shouldn't I be second or maybe even like fifth on the list? And I say no. If we're viewing this as an integration model, then our time with God falls under you. Because what we're prioritizing are the things that recharge us and build us up and fill us. Time with God, for example, would be one of those things. So if I'm not prioritizing myself first, then I'm not going to be able to make time for my relationship with God. So we have to keep our priorities straight. What are we valuing? So what does self-care look like? So again, we want to keep in mind that this is an integration model. So we want to start with small steps, small changes, just do a few at a time until they become habitual. And then once that becomes comfortable, then we can continue to add more and more as time goes on. If we do too much at one time, it's unsustainable. It's like, I can't just change my whole life overnight. I can't just go from being a vegan to an omnivore overnight. It takes time. We want it to be integrative, so we're not just waking up, working, going to bed. Instead, we're putting some fun back into our lives. We want to design things to look forward to. These things can be big, they can be small. Just keeping in mind that life is not just about working, it's about living. And you can fit it in, you just need to make it happen. It's all about prioritizing. No is a full sentence, and sometimes we need to say no to things. And remembering that rest is required, it's not a reward. So by prioritizing yourself first, these are the mainstays. So if a client comes in, these are some of the history questions that I'm asking to understand more about their world. And if these things aren't in proper balance, how can anything else be in proper balance. A great deal of the time, many of their problems are stemming from or exacerbated by this list not being in check. So diet, exercise, and sleep are fundamentally the most important things that you can focus on. Diet, for example, making sure that we're just not eating like crap. Looking online, figuring out how to meal prep on a Sunday so that we have at least the first few days of the week covered. Cooking a little extra at night so that we have lunch the next day. Saving money, saving time. I know for me that when my self-care starts to slip, one of the first things to go is my diet. I can try to eat healthy out, but it gets expensive, so making not great decisions. So taking time and focusing on what is going into my body as fuel is vital. Sometimes we can be so busy we work through lunch. That's not okay. Where are we taking our break? For me personally, exercise by far is one of the most important ones. If I'm not physical and I'm just waking up, sitting at the table for breakfast, then I'm sitting in the car to go to work, and then I'm sitting at work seeing clients, and then I'm sitting at lunch, and then I'm sitting on the car ride back, and then I'm sitting when I get home, and then I'm sitting again and again. Where am I getting my exercise in? So even doing a 20-minute walk around the neighborhood is vital. Anything is better than nothing. Get some of that exercise in, whatever that might look like. How small. I've heard podcasts of people talking about, even if all you can do is walk to the mailbox and back, that's perfect. Getting some kind of exercise. Sleep is another huge factor, which is greatly affected by so many things. And you can Google how to get better sleep. You can talk to a sleep doctor. There are so many different resources out there. And we're just gonna have to focus on some of the generalities of sleep, but keeping in mind that we wanna have consistency in our sleep, as well as we want to focus on the quality of our sleep. So even if you're getting less hours of sleep, but they're consistent, going to bed at the same time, getting up at the same time, our body adjusts to that. If we're going to bed at any time and waking up at any time, our brain has no way to recalibrate when to go in a REM cycle, when to get that deep sleep. And so we're not necessarily waking up refreshed. And another key is, how do we wake up in the morning? I tend to snooze about 30 alarms, which is really, really bad. It's best to get up first alarm, first time, no snoozing. In fact, actually getting up at the last possible moment that your last alarm would be set for example, and just getting up then. You might be a little bit groggy at first, but your brain will thank you later. You may even be able to reduce the coffee intake. Keeping doctor's appointments, not avoiding blood work, not avoiding doing your yearly checkup, going to the dentist, the things that keep us going. Preventative measures can save us huge down the line. We also want to remember to keeping boundaries with work, boundaries with things that drain us, boundaries with people that we don't necessarily enjoy. I had a client who worked from home, and it was really hard to disconnect. And I said, all right, we'll pick a stop time, and that's when your day ends. And he worked from home. And I said, then I want you just to get in your car, and you don't even have to leave the garage, but play a song in your car for like 5 minutes and then go back in the house. And you don't look at your work computer again until the next day. And eventually, after a week or two, that was a break for the brain that knew, I got in the car, I listened to music. That was like my commute home. It disconnected me from being at work. And it worked like a charm. Self-care takes consistency and discipline. And we want to stay present in the here and now. So for this client, he would be constantly thinking about work, checking work emails, rather than spending time with his family who was right in front of him. it's really important to stay present in the here and now. If I'm with my family, I'm with my family. If I'm with my friend, I'm with my friend. If I'm watching a show, I'm watching a show. If I'm at work, I'm at work. Staying present in these moments rather than multitasking, pulling me out instead of integrating in. Then we have active and passive recharge relaxing. Something passive would be like watching Netflix. Nothing wrong with it. We can kind of check out, watch the new great show that's out. However, it's not quite the same as active recharging and relaxing. Active is just what it is. It's being social, hanging out with people. Maybe it's doing a sport or getting exercise. They can also cost us energy, but they're recharging us. They're filling up the tank. Like going to the gym for an hour, I might be really tired after, but I feel better, if that makes sense. And remember to integrate this into your daily life. Make your schedule work for you so that you have this in there. And keeping in mind, extroversion and introversion are just the ways that we get energy. So being social for an extrovert is very recharging, where an introvert might need some alone time, and make sure to schedule that in if you know you're going to have a busy weekend. Schedule in maybe even just an hour of alone time to do what you want to do to recharge. And with boundaries, again, it's think about what you're accepting, saying yes to, the hours you're working, what I'm not cutting myself off from. Am I bringing work home? Am I staying present? And just simply asking yourself, what is it that is making you miserable day to day? That's a great place to start. Where do I need to create boundaries around this so that it's not being the focus of my life? And it's also about setting yourself up for success. So taking the time to do things that your future self will thank you for, like meal prep, or even simply putting clothes out for the next day. I know when I wake up, and if I end up waking up late, I'm rushing. And that's one of the most exhausting things for me. When I feel rushed and underprepared, that definitely helps me feel more burnt out versus feeling more assured and rested. So for example, before I leave the office each day, I go and look for all the session notes for all the clients that I'm meeting with the next day, and I put them in order on my desk so that when I get in the next morning, I already know everybody that I'm seeing, and I just pull from the top and I'm ready to roll. And it's something that only takes me 5 minutes, but when I hit traffic or I'm late or something goes awry and I show up to the office and now I have to look for the notes to work in, man, that just adds so much extra stress to my day. And you can remember the acronym of KISS, K-I-S, keep it simple. They don't have to be these major life changes. For me, even just doing those notes that takes 5 minutes just makes my day. Or taking a shower in the evening rather than the morning can make my morning a lot more relaxing. Pre-filling my coffee maker. It's the small things. We want to set ourselves up for success. And thinking about what fills you back up, what energizes you, what recharges your mind, body, and spirit. That's a great place to start with self-care. What are the things that I really enjoy doing? Let's make some time for that. And one other thing that we tend to fall into the trap of is this procrastination limbo, where maybe we get home from work and we still have chores and tasks to do. And we kind of like sit there on some social media instead of just fully relaxing or fully just being productive and then relaxing after. And we're not doing either. We're not truly relaxing and we're not truly being productive. And then we start to feel more exhausted. So pick one. Either relax fully and embrace it and just say whatever to the chores, or take a half hour and just get everything done. And one massive thing that you can start doing right from the get-go is not looking at your phone the moment that you wake up in the morning, at least for 30 minutes. And if you do have to look at it for some reason, try to wait that 30 minutes. But within 60 minutes, only respond to things that are an emergency or vitally important. Maybe it's wishing a loved one to have a great day, but not getting into social media. In fact, I try not to look at social media until the afternoon. I find my day starts way better when I'm focused on the here and now and I'm present, rather than already being inundated with the comparison game or inundated with making my attention span shorter. What's the next TikTok video? So those are definitely some places to start. And now we're going to go into how to prevent burnout. So one of my favorites is an energy audit. So you guys have heard about a to-do list, which is great, or even auditing our time. But a to-do list is great for listing out everything that we need to do, but it's very antiquated. It can get our priorities out of whack and overwhelm us with too much to do. Tasks can get lost, we can feel overwhelmed, and then we start to avoid things. I don't know about you, but when I was in college and just had too many projects to do, I would default just try and take a nap. So where do we even start? Well, this is a great thing to try, and I recommend it for about 2 weeks. And what it tends to do is help us look at what is fulfilling us and what is really, really draining us. So it's about our energy, not so much our time. So we take a look at the scale here at the bottom. So it goes from -2, -1, 0, +1, +2. And I have some example charts on here. So a few of these were a weekend, one of them was a weekday. And so what we want to do is we want to score each thing that we do. So for this person, they slept in until 11 a.m. I believe this was a Saturday, and it just helped them so much. And so they gave it a 2. And then they were lazy on the couch for a little bit. Who doesn't enjoy the slow start to a Saturday? But then their fiance was late to a baby shower that they were going to, and that was a -1, rushing. Then they were driving in the car with no music. That was a -1, right? You're starting to see kind of a pattern here. Things that they would experience throughout their day was either something that was revitalizing or it was taking something away from them. I think over here, wedding talk, golf, and other people are mad. There was a whole story behind that. They were planning their wedding and people were disagreeing, and it was very draining, and it was a -2. But the dog snuggles later in the afternoon definitely made up for it. So you see each day is ending with a different total. So the first day was a +3, then this day was a -5, the next day was a +2 after doing all of these things. Well, if we start labeling each thing that we do each day with a value, the goal is to have a positive day, a positive number at the end. If we're having a lot of negative days in a row, well, that means each day we're feeling left exhausted rather than somewhat rejuvenated. So going to the gym, for example, could be a +2, even though I feel tired after. It really fulfills me and energizes me and gets me set up for the rest of the day. Whereas like doing my taxes would be like a -2. It's not fun, even though I need to do it. And yeah, maybe I feel satisfied that it's done. It's more of a relief than it is something that I'm happy about, so to speak. And if we're having too many -2s in the same day, maybe we need to start spreading some of that out. In fact, sometimes we might look and say, why are all my meetings this week a -2? Then we can look at that and break it down and go, well, am I giving myself any time to prepare for these meetings? What's my disposition going into them? Or my perspective? What's my outlook? Maybe that's contributing to why they're a -2 rather than maybe even neutral. For this person who had all of their energy audit, this is just a few days of theirs, just by giving themselves a little bit extra time in the morning so they didn't have to rush into work, changed all the scores for the rest of the day. They found that when they were rushing, everything was worse. But then when they had a more casual morning, they were able to feel like they got to work early, they had time to have their morning coffee, everything was a little bit easier. When they put little mini breaks even during the day, which we'll talk about, it's called white space, just to decompress in the day or prepare for a meeting, it made those meetings better. So there's a lot of ways to change our scores. And about 2 weeks worth of data, we can really look to say, why are some days exhausting and some days recharging? We can even look at the total for the week and say, this whole week I'm like -50. What happened? That could be a great sign that I'm not integrating self-care. Integrating self-care could be as simple as leaving 15 minutes extra early for work, so I'm not feeling like I'm always behind the ball. Adding in a little bit of a break, adding a walk at the end of the day, calling a friend on my way home from work, listening to music or a podcast that really energizes me in the morning. This is a great way to see, is my self-care integrated with my day? When am I taking breaks? What are the pieces in my life that leave me just drained? This is a very powerful tool that I highly, highly recommend trying. And it's not something you have to do forever, but if you keep it consistent for 2 weeks, it can really reveal a lot for yourself. So an energy audit for sure. Where is our energy going? And then when we talk about time, so we have time blocking. So it's a method of combining task management in your calendar. So instead of just having my to-do lists, and a lot of billionaires and extremely famous people use time blocking over to-do lists. So you might start off with a to-do list, but we want to break that down into periods of time that I'm getting things done. So like Elon Musk, Jeffrey Bezos, people like that, they use time blocking. They block out pieces in their schedule that says, this is when I'm doing this type of work. It doesn't say what I'm doing during that. I can throw that in there, of course, but this is the time that I have to do it. And you know what? If I don't get it done in that hour, then it just doesn't get done. I'll do it tomorrow. What's really nice about that is it helps us to focus because we have a let off time. We have brackets. We know that I'm not going to have to just sit here and do emails till they're done. I'm doing emails for 30 minutes and then I can move on to something else. In fact, so often we check emails first thing in the morning when we get to work. That can actually detract us from what's important in our day or ruin our focus by making us make a ton of decision making and multitasking right off the bat. Instead, we should really do the most important task first in the day and do emails later morning. Or even just pepper blocks of time for emails throughout the day rather than just doing them when they come in. So often we can just answer the incoming texts or the whatever messaging software or email in the moment. And then it can take up to 20 minutes to get back focused on the project at hand. Instead, block your emails even in your day. So you see two different schedules here. The person on the left has a huge block for writing and research. That's freedom to go, hey, these are the things that I want to take care of today. Maybe you block in like making dinner, or this is the time that I'm just allowed to have some fun. These are what my meetings are. Time blocking is really useful if you find yourself being a multitasker or you need help focusing on just one task to reduce distractions, kind of taking away that multitasking component. What you want to be intentional about for your time and energy at work and get a clearer sense of where your time is going each day. And it keeps you from overworking because you have an end time. And this may, some of the limitations may not always be conducive rather for the plan that you have. However, there are flexibilities where maybe I had a meeting scheduled and that meeting got canceled. And now I can throw something else in that block. You also need to take some time to figure out, like, when am I most creative? So the person on the left has writing and research early in the morning. I'm more creative in the mid-afternoon or evening so that maybe my block would be there. Also, with time blocking, what's really nice is we start to make a habit for our brain. And if my creative time is 3 to 4 p.m., well, if I do that every day, then 3 o'clock is going to roll around and my brain's ready to be creative because it knows that's the time I have for it. This really helps keeping things from becoming too overwhelming. And it forces us to take breaks because we don't want to confuse activity with productivity. Sometimes busy is just being busy and not doing a whole lot for us. So keep that in mind for sure. This is another one that I absolutely love. It's task by time. Works great for small tasks or tasks that never really can be completed fully, like cleaning the house, for example. So what I like to do is when I come home, I'll set a timer for 10 minutes and I'll say this 10 minutes today is focused on the kitchen or the living room or the bedroom. It's just somewhere. And then when that 10 minutes is up, I'm done. I don't have to, everything doesn't have to be completely clean, but that 10 minutes just made the biggest difference in the world. And I'm focusing on one area rather than just touching each room in the house, seemingly not really cleaning anything. So that's an absolutely fantastic one, task by time. It lets you off the hook. It's great for starting to integrate reading into your life. If I say I have to read for 15 minutes each day, well, I just set a clock and in 15 minutes, I'm let off the hook. So even if I don't feel like doing it, I only have to do it for 15 minutes. And if I'm loving it, I can go beyond that 15 minutes. But it makes it a lot easier to do things that we're really not looking forward to doing or we might be avoiding because we have a stop time. We're letting ourselves off the hook. We're saying, just give me 10 minutes. Can you do 10 minutes? Sure. Okay, done. And then you feel great about all the things that you've accomplished in even that small amount of time. I know for me, sometimes getting myself back in the habit of going to the gym, I'll say, well, if I go to the gym, I have to be there for an hour and I have to do all these different workouts and everything else. I say, what if I just go for 20 minutes and then I can just leave? I won't even get terribly hot and sweaty. I won't even have to shower and do all that stuff. Well, I get there. And of course, the hardest part was just getting there. And then I start feeling great. And then I end up being there for an hour and a half. And I'm just so happy that I even went in the first place because it was so much easier sitting on the couch. Always remember a body in motion will stay in motion and a body at rest stays at rest. So this is a fantastic one. Importance versus urgency. So this is a great chart. So sometimes when we have these to-do lists, it can feel overwhelming. Like, where do I even start? And so I like to put them in each of these boxes. Important, but not urgent or important, urgent, but not important, and important and urgent. And here's a box that has some examples and which box would be priority. So moves up in urgency, moves up in importance. We have the main priorities right here. And President Eisenhower was actually known to use this method a lot. And so it really helps us to put and prioritize what we really need to get done, because sometimes things that are really important get thrown and pushed back over and over again because of the distraction of what seems urgent. And what's urgent might not even really matter all that much, but it's up in our face, it's an email, it's a whatever, rather than focusing on what's truly important that would take a lot of pressure long-term off of our shoulders. This works with work and home and things like that. For example, a leaking faucet might not seem that urgent, but it's really important when unattended and a long time may be causing a lot of damage beneath the surface in the home, behind a wall, something like that. And we're so focused on what's urgent. Oh, I got to clean this. I got to go to the grocery store. I got to do that. That I don't stop and say, that faucet is only going to take me 15, 20 minutes and could save me a huge headache down the line. In fact, I had a client who didn't take a look at their leaky faucet and now has to redo an entire ceiling in their house because there's so much moisture damage just from a leaking faucet. So this is a great organizational tool that says urgency, just because it's flashy, doesn't mean that we have to do it in an urgent way. Sometimes what's important is figuring out a system of automation so that we don't have to do it all the time. Something that even takes 5 minutes, if I can delegate that, the time really adds up. Sometimes what's really important is making a dentist appointment for a tooth that's been aching, but it doesn't always seem that urgent. And if I don't take care of myself, then that could create larger problems down the line. And a lot of times the important things we tend to avoid and procrastinate because they're a bigger deal. They take a lot more time or energy or attention, or we want to get it all done at once. Maybe it's a big project. So we use some of the urgent things that pop up that are little to procrastinate the big thing and still feel productive, still feel like I'm getting things done, yet I'm not actually getting done the thing that's going to matter to me most. In fact, discipline is about giving up the thing that we want for the thing that we do want the most. So this really helps to prioritize tasks. So I definitely highly recommend that one. And then finally, we have something called white space. And it's a strategic pause taken between activities. So this is something that you want to schedule in. And I like to have it between meetings, like when I'm seeing clients. Sessions are 50 minutes. I'm really bad at ending on the 50-minute mark, but I've been trying to get better and better because those few minutes, those 5 to 10 minutes in between each client, I have to use the restroom, check text messages, finish my note, take a look at the note from last week for the person that I'm seeing next. There's a lot to do in that short period of time. And if I don't take that, then I feel frantic moving into the next session because I didn't give myself time to just think. These are constructive pauses used as thoughtfulness. I love taking them between meetings. Get to the meeting a few minutes early so that I can just think, what is this meeting even about? Or even after a meeting to process what I've just talked about or what I've learned. It's great before and after classes. It's to help slow things down a little bit for us. It gives us time to be creative. And it's not so much a break to look at our phones. How often, if we have a 5-minute break, we check our phone, we check Instagram, we check social media. Instead, what if we just sat there for a minute alone with our thoughts? And this is just fantastic because it allows our brain to bring up things that maybe we had forgotten, or a moment to come up with a new idea or get creative. So often we end up in bed late at night and we're trying to fall asleep, and all of a sudden we're getting inundated with all these thoughts from the day. Oh, I forgot to do this, or I have to do this to-do list later, or whatever. Well, it's because we didn't give ourselves any white space during the day to think about all that stuff. So then the first time that we're actually sitting still for 5 minutes is when our head hits the pillow. So I've noticed giving yourself white space really helps quiet the mind before bed, which allows for better sleep, et cetera, et cetera. So something really, really small, even implemented a few times during the day for 5 to 10 minutes, can make all the difference in the world. And if you're saying to yourself, how can I possibly add these things into my life? You can't afford not to. In fact, taking care of yourself is the priority. And a lot of times, I'm sure we're thinking, oh my gosh, how have I not been doing all of this stuff? Where do I even start? I say just start small. It's just about doing something, starting somewhere. If you make even just one change per week, well, that's 52 changes a year that are long-term now, compounding week after week. January 1st to January 1st, that's 52 changes, one change a week. Well, even halfway through, that's 25 changes that I'm consistently doing each day. That's amazing. Start small, start slow, and just do something. So I want to thank you all for being a part of this. This has just been fantastic to see you guys the past few weeks in this Becoming a Better You seminar series. I would love for you to continue with me in this journey of trying to impact others to increase healing and growth and change in our lives. My mission is to impact others, to help them grow. So if you'd like to be a part of that mission, please take a moment to, if you get your cell phone out, you can go to the camera and scan either one of these. The link tree will bring you to all of my different links. I also put my email in the chat. So if you don't have social media, you can go there, and I'll come back to this in a second. I just want to show you a couple resources. These you may have seen from last week. These are about atomic habits, or how to create and implement habits. This also is a book about great ways of changing things that we do on a daily basis. If you want more about white space in a minute to think, this book by Juliet Funt is fantastic. This is a great book on boundaries by Dr. Cloud and Dr. Townsend, really about how to make changes in your lives. The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek, fantastic way of looking at things a little bit differently. So I'll leave these up for a moment. Please feel free, add in some questions that you might have, some clarifications on anything that you might need that we talked about today. I know we covered a lot. And then I'll go back to the social media that you can scan that as well. But again, I want to say thank you so much for being here with us over the past several weeks. And I hope you enjoyed the seminar series. I know I certainly did. Hopefully you took away a lot of wonderful things. And, you know, I look forward to seeing you guys in things upcoming. I'm sure I'll be doing other seminars, and I'll be posting more and more material on the social media as I go. I'll be starting a podcast in a few weeks. We're actually working on that project now. Things will be continually added to the YouTube, Instagram, and eventually TikTok. So thank you again, everyone who was behind the creation of this, as well as all of you that participated as the audience. Thank you again. And I'll be taking questions and be hanging around for a little bit. And thank you guys all for your kind words so much. I see someone commented too in Portugal, they said a new law was recently passed. Employers may not email workers after working hours. That's awesome. I know there was several countries that had really high suicide rates due to work, and I believe it was Switzerland. Don't hold me to that. I know it was Switzerland or somewhere in that area in Europe. They changed to a 6-day work week. A 4-day work week for 6 hours instead of 8, and it changed everything. And their rates, they're one of the best in the country now instead of one of the worst, or in the world. They're one of the best versus the worst for rates of suicide and discontentment with work, just by changing. They did two. They did a 4-day work week, and they also did a 6-hour a day, 5-day work week, and both showed fantastic results. And it's amazing that we're still stuck in the 9 to 5 days a week. And that was started by Henry Ford for manufacturing, because everybody needed to be there in order for the car to be mass produced. So everybody had to be working on the line for it to continue going through the line. And it's so antiquated that we're still doing that. I believe that was 1920 or maybe even earlier. And that we're still stuck with that with school, with work. And so often research shows time and time again that working less hours improves quality of life, productivity at work, it saves a ton of money, and still getting paid the same amount It's just been, it's wild research in that we haven't followed. I saw actually a tech company gave their employees a $7,000 bonus if they didn't touch their phone when they took a week-long vacation. Like they couldn't touch it at all. They had to install software and everything. They couldn't even pick it up to look at it. So basically, I had to turn it off and go and enjoy their vacation. It was pretty cool. And we have other countries around the world that force you to take vacation. And here in America, they're like, "Oh, you're sick? Well, and you're taking the day off? Well, you better be working virtually then." And it's just ridiculous. So we have to really, the change starts with us. So we have to take those steps for sure. In college, I put the alarm clock on the other side of the room, so I had to get up. But today I'm notorious for hitting the snooze button. Yeah, absolutely. I actually, in college, I would sleep so deeply. I got an alarm clock that had a disc that you would slide under the pillow or the mattress that would shake, so that I would make sure I would get up in time for class. Yeah, they say, someone mentioned, sometimes people say, especially near retirement, it's just better to do what the boss says. Just kind of keep your head down, and that is infuriating for sure. A lot of times, people are hired into management that don't necessarily know how to lead people, but instead just were good at what they did, never taught how to be a leader. And that can be really frustrating. Someone sent me a picture that they're having a glass of wine and a pint of ice cream and watching the seminar, and that's their self-care. I like it. I think we could all get on board with that. All right, guys. Well, it doesn't seem like there's too many questions, but I very much appreciate these kind words. I'm so glad that you guys have enjoyed these seminars. I'm really looking forward to seeing you all in the future. I hope you all have a wonderful evening, and have a fantastic week. And good luck. Hopefully, you guys can apply some of these into your lives and make a real difference in all the things that you're doing on a daily basis. So make sure you go and get some rest and do some things for yourselves this week.